share here is to give you some idea as to how to reduce potential plagiarism. Because sometimes we do get involved or we do find ourselves in the middle of doing or setting ourselves into basically plagiarize either intentionally or unintentionally. So without further ado, basically I will set a few ground rules. Okay, so my particular session usually will have two sessions or two sub-sessions, right? The first one is the overview of how to avoid plagiarism, and the second part will be focusing on how to master citations, because that will be the forward way or the way forward for us to reduce the our possibility to plagiarized, right? So I think for this 2-hour session, I will focus on the first part because a lot of you are exposed in citation. But if I have enough time to go through all the examples, right? I will go through all the examples, right? 10 minutes before 12, we will basically open up for Q&A. And if, let's say, I am not having enough time to go through all the examples, I will ask the secretariat to give you a style guide for references, particularly online references, because nowadays, everyone do a lot of online citations rather than physical journals or books, etc. So I would do that because I'm not really sure, because usually my training for this particular topic would run 2 hours to half a day, depending on the complexity of the session, right? Like I said, if I don't have enough time to share with you or to go through all the examples, because I've included a lot of examples, I will provide a guide to the secretariat to disseminate among the participants. I think that would be a fair, a fair way to actually go forward with this. All right. Okay, without further ado, let's share my slide. Okay, can everyone see my slide? I shall put it on slide mode, I guess. I think everyone can see, right? Miss Pavitra, can you see my slide?
Can, Doctor.
Okay. Okay, it's not changing to slide mode. I'm not sure why. But if let's say it stays like this, I will try to enlarge it as much as possible, because I have tried to basically put it in slide mode, but it doesn't work. So I don't know why. Maybe of the, some issues with my internet or so, but it's fine. But I hope everyone can see. I will enlarge it into at least 80% or 90% so that you can see the content. So for this particular session, I will speak more of avoiding plagiarism. As I've mentioned before, you cannot avoid plagiarism. Either you are doing scholarly work or non-scholarly work. This is particularly happen, especially nowadays, all of us use AI, right? But the idea of having this particular workshop is to actually use these tools ethically. I mean, we cannot escape not to use these tools, but it is important for you as postgraduate students to use it wisely and ethically. Okay, we moved on. So this is particularly what is plagiarism is all about. So basically, as I've mentioned before, I don't necessarily read my slides, okay? So what I would do always is to basically do a little summary of my slides. So as you can see here, right, you are doing or presenting your academic work by presenting someone else's work of ideas, right? And then sometimes students caught up with the fact that they are busy copy pasting the main idea, but they forget to include their own idea that relates to the previous author's idea. I think that's the main reason why scholarly work become high in plagiarized percentage, right? Because students usually, okay, kind of like you read a particular article or a particular journal, you seem like this particular statement is streamlined with your research interest or with your research idea. But what people kind of forget most of the time is to include or to kind of integrate your particular idea that actually speaks or represented by the previous author. Either your ideas support the notion, contradict to the notion, or somehow help to justify your notion. So I think you have to understand that plagiarism is usually when you don't do anything about the ideas that you read somewhere and simply copy paste it and claim it as part of your idea, right? And as I've mentioned before, plagiarism can be intentional or unintentional. So that's why citation is very important. All right. So um types of plagiarism. I'm not sure as to why. I'll try again. I just can. Oh yes, okay. So basically, intentional plagiarism is when you intentionally just copy paste and doing nothing. Basically, you don't put the attribution, the proper citation, etc. And then this unintentional one is always that because as scholars, as novice researchers, we try our best to avoid intentional plagiarism because we know it is not the right thing to do. But sometimes we do caught ourselves into unintentional because we don't do the citations right. We actually don't cross-ref the citations. What do I mean by cross-ref? Cross-ref means, let's say for example, right? You have done the paragraph and you put the in-text citations inside your paragraph, but you did not put the citation list or the citation details on your ref list. Or you have the citation ref list at the back, but you didn't put proper citation in the paragraphs. So you don't do the cross-ref kind of like diligently. So I think before you excitedly start writing, you have to basically bear in mind, put in your mind that it is very, very, very important that you actually cross-ref as you go. Because what students, I think, what happened to a lot of students, not to say all, but a lot of students, they, like I said, they are busy copy pastings, copy and pastings. They forgot to basically do the proper paraphrasing, or they forget to do the cross-check altogether. Okay? And then consequences. So among the consequences, you would actually have failing grade, suspension, expulsion, damage of reputation of yourself as well as your institution, in this case UPM, as well as you might also face legal issues because this is part of the copyright infringement. So this is particularly very, 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 very important. Okay, so you have to know in your institution what will be the preferred citation styles. For example, in my faculty, we preferred APA citation style. So basically, as a standard practice in our faculty, we would like to encourage all students in my faculty to focus on APA style citation. But then, other faculties or other universities or publishing institution in that matter would have different preferences. The most important thing about citation is the accurate and consistency of the citation. That's why you have to do the cross-ref all the time and making sure that ideas that you quote from others is properly acknowledged. That's why in the citation style, the formatting of the style that you chose is very, very, very important and need to be consistent. And then for citation tools, okay, this is somewhat of a backstory. When I was a student, my PhD journey was rather very interesting yet taxing, because during my time, there's not a lot of citation tools that I can choose from that is available for free to do automatic citation for me. Unlike these days, you have a lot of tools, actually, a lot more tools that can help with citation to make sure that you are doing the cross-ref, not to say effortlessly, but to kind of do it consistently with less effort. Even with the help with online tools or software or apps, you still have to have the eye to check for the consistency. I would say my experience in using citation tools, it's not 100% accurate, particularly for the type of publication that is rarely used in scholarly works. Not to say they are not used, but they are quite rarely used in scholarly work. So you have to kind of be diligent to look at the guidelines again to see whether your way of citing the less common references correctly or otherwise. Right? So this is basically how you can minimize plagiarism. The first and the most common technique is paraphrasing. That's why, as I've mentioned previously, you have to integrate your own ideas into the thoughts that has been mentioned by the previous scholars. That is what we call paraphrasing. You actually integrate the consistency of your ideas in your own words while maintaining the meaning of the relevant sources that you have chosen. And then the second technique is summarizing. Summarizing meaning that let's say for example, you read the finding session of one journal article. Okay, the finding section of one journal article. So when you summarize the findings, not necessarily take it line by line, that is also a way for you to minimize plagiarizing, because you integrate it to be a compact unit rather than separated paragraphs. And then this is very, very, very important. The third point, you always have to put attribution, or you have to always put acknowledgement to the source that you are citing. Basically, that's why citation becomes very, very, very important. Even if the original idea comes from ChatGPT, you have to make sure that the idea that comes from ChatGPT is somewhat originates from ChatGPT, and you have to properly cite them, cite ChatGPT as a source. But then, before doing that, you have to make sure that the facts that ChatGPT presented are accurate facts. Because even ChatGPT itself or any other AI model, AI language model, they acknowledge that they may make some mistakes. So you have, as a human brain, you have to kind of like dissect whether they are actually presenting you with facts or they are just fabricating information. Right? Quoting appropriately. So if, let's say, you want to write a direct quote, you have to use it selectively and strategically. You don't quote the exact same paragraph. What you do is you dissect the most important component that will be beneficial for your research. Okay? And then you have to make sure that the accuracy or the verbatim meaning that the exact word that is used in the quotation should be indicated. Let's say, for example, you're quoting parts of the book. You have to mention the page number and where does it come from in the in-text citation as well as the references list. And then basically, again, you have to give full credit to the original author. All right, so managing sources and notes. For your information, in doing research, it is very, 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 very important to have your own research notes where you jot down all your ideas that comes from your reading of that, but it is not necessarily coming from the previous literature. Basically, what you have done maybe, for example, expand the idea from the previous literature. So the most important thing is for you to actually have your own research notes so that it is easier for you to integrate those information that you write into the paraphrasing and summary processes. Right? So the organization of this information is very important. You can do different strategies as I listed here. You can basically index this as bibliography, basically alphabetical, and then index card. Index card is also something that I like to do, particularly if it's a topical organization of my notes. Okay, and then it's always also helpful if you have digital note-taking app. But you have to make sure that the digital note-taking app that we have in the marketplace right now can actually read your diction. Let's say, for example, if you're using English, make sure that the app itself can understand your English. If the app actually set in Malay, then you should be able to basically have a perfect diction in Malay or any other languages that the app actually identifies with. All right, so, and the second point is basically noting where the information coming from. For example, the publication date, the URL, website, the time or the date that you are actually accessing those information. These are important elements, particularly if you are citing online or from the internet sources. Because some of the formatting, some of the citation styles require you to also include when exactly you access those information online. Okay, right. Okay, I would like to ask you all, right? As you can see here, I only write the title, Plagiarism Detection Tools and Software, without actually kind of like copy pasting or featuring any kind of logo for the apps or any particular SEO that can operate as plagiarism detection tools. The reason being that the options are endless. Okay, from the more traditional plagiarism detection tools such as Turnitin, Grammarly, Quibbooks, all of them not only can improve your grammar, but can help to detect plagiarism, either by ready-made sources or by AI sources. Like, let's say, for example, right, apps like Turnitin that is available by UPM can actually already detect whether the paragraphs that you are writing is generated by AI or not. So I think personally, it's like a no-brainer for me to mention which plagiarism detection tools are better than others. But as I said, if you use those platforms or if you use AI language platforms ethically, it should not be a problem, provided that it really provided you with facts rather than a combination of fabrication of facts as well as the objected facts. So to save yourself from misery, right, you have to ask, right? Let's say, for example, in our faculty, what is the acceptable plagiarized percentage would be 20% and below. And let's say, for example, you have to ask the authority in your faculty whether that 20% includes AI-generated content. In most universities, let's say, for example, I just come back from NUS in the recent months, in a couple of months ago, they actually include that as part of the plagiarism rate, meaning that the 20% can include some sources generated from AI platforms, right? So this is something that we as human beings, as I said, we can always use different sources, but it should be cited properly. It should be cited and acknowledged properly based on what will be the preference that you want to use, either APA or MLA, or let's say, for example, Harvard. You know, it's not so much on using those resources available to you, but how to use it ethically. All right. So basically, before I focused on mastering citation, I would like to actually enlighten you on how to do your writing or how to organize your writing in a more systematic manner, right? So you have to plan your writing process, right? Basically, I always use the inverted pyramid, for example, when I write my literature review, the inverted pyramid structure, or some people call it the funnel structure. Let's say, for example, when writing literature review, that will be the most efficient for me, because some students think that they should go with the most convenient way. Doing research is not convenient. Doing research is all about what will be the most effective for you and your field of study. So you have to actually plan your writing process, right? Basically, you have to, that's why I said, you have to make sure that you actually utilize your note-taking skills and you get it organized, and you actually use citation formats to save yourself from plagiarism. Okay, and then secondly, you have to conduct research. Research here not necessarily about your topic, but to make sure that your whatever that you are going to write is basically within the ethical domain and within the legitimized way of gathering information. Because sometimes, due to the information overload, okay, we tend to rush things. We tend to be very occupied with our thinking. Oh, I've read too much. Because there's one student of mine, he was very concerned that he read 100 articles already in his PhD journey. So I said, it's not about how many articles you read. It's never about how many articles you read. It is always about how you read them, and whether those articles that you have read actually can contribute to your research process. Okay, and I think out of all of the 5 steps, step number 2, which is conducting the research after you plan, would basically take the most time to be comfortable doing. Once you are comfortable doing your step 2, it will be easier for you to do the note taking. It will be easier for you to do the drafting, and it will be easier for for you to do the revision. Right? But the hardest part, or the most part that you need some a customization, some climmatization, is the research part. Because you want to avoid the need to borrow too much from other people's work. That's why at the end of your thesis, during your viva, your examiner will say, what will be the original contribution for your research? Right? So out of all these 5 steps, excuse me, doing the research will be the most time-taking, the most time-consuming process or phase that you have to get used to. Like I said, it's not the most convenient. It is always, you have to always think about what will be the most effective way for me. And for each researcher, the effectiveness is different. The way, let's say, for example, how I plan my writing habit will be effective for me, but may not be as effective if I want you to apply the same process. So finding yourself within the research process, within this developing good writing habit, will take a lot of time, and it will take a lot of adjustments as well, because in this process you have to actually look at your expectation and match it with your supervisor's expectation, for example. So if you ask me, the trickiest part of your academic journey would be item number 2. Once you get your groove, once you get how actually you would want to implement number 2, it is much easier to implement number 3, which is the note-taking. It is much easier to actually keep track of your writing. Once you are good at note-taking, it is quite easy to transition to drafting and revision. And for me, for example, like during my PhD journey, I'm just basically sharing this with you. The time frame that I actually do, step number 1, which is planning, researching, and note-taking, it took me more than 6 months to actually basically familiarize myself with the process. And mind you, I studied every day at the library at the time. Every single day except for Hari Raya, I get 2 or 3 days off, right? But most of the time, I would basically spend a lot of time at the graduate wing at the library, because I'm as mentioned before, I graduated from UPM, so I had a lot of memories and spending my time at the facilities provided by the university. So these particular steps cannot rush. But that doesn't mean you need to actually take so much time, because if you take so much time, then you'll be left behind. Right? So mastering citations. This is another important component of my presentation today, right? My sharing with you guys. I wouldn't say that I teach you, but whatever that I actually share with you today is basically part of my experience. As I've mentioned, for this particular purpose, I will basically focus more on APA style citation. But let's say, for example, if your faculty prefers any other citation style, it doesn't matter. Basically, the components that you need to include in your citation remains the same. Just the difference is basically the positioning of those items and the formatting of those items. Basically, formatting means in APA, basically you put the surname first and then you put the first name initial, for instance, but then other citation might actually do it a little bit differently. But the information, the type of information that you need to include in your citation is pretty much the same for across all types of citation formatting. It's just how you present it, maybe a little bit different. Okay. So, before I concentrate into mastering citation, I would like to take one or two questions regarding my previous section, which is the overview. If you have one or two questions, because after this, if we have time, I would like to go through each of the examples, right? And due to that massive amount of examples, that is why my slides today is a little bit longer than my usual my usual training. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself or you can type your questions in the chat box. Basically, I would like to ask help from Miss Pavitra to read them because right now I'm in a full screen view. So at times I cannot view the questions on the chat box, if any, properly. Okay, so I will give the participants 5 minutes to ask me one or two questions relating to the previous segment. Any questions? Am I doing this too fast? Like, is the pace okay for you all? Miss Pavitra, any questions in the chat box so far? Is there any question, Miss Pavitra? Can you hear me? So far, is there any questions? Not yet? Okay, not yet, so it's fine. So if there are no questions at this moment, I shall proceed to the next segment. And this is particularly quite technical, okay, in terms of how would you present your citations inside your paragraph as well as in your references list, okay? Mind you, as I've mentioned before, my focus today is to go through APA citation. But like I said, for those of you who is not doing APA style, as mentioned before, the components or the items that is needed for any other citation format or style is quite similar. It's just the presentation of those formats might be a little bit different in terms of the position, in terms of how the item is presented, either italic or non-italic, either bold or non-bold, or where exactly they position the year of publication, etc. But in terms of the items, it's relatively quite the same across the board, regardless of what will be the citation format that is preferred by your faculty or the journal that you are submitting.
Sorry, Doctor.
Okay. Yes.
They do have a question in the chat box.
Okay.
They are like, how best to verify accuracy of information from AI, such as ChatGPT?
Mm-hmm.
And then how best to, yeah, the same question. How do you want to actually verify the sources and how accurate is the information that you get from AI sources like ChatGPT and stuff?
Well, the advice that I can tell you is basically just do cross checks, cross ref, right? Let's say, for example, you try to ask ChatGPT about me. Let's say, for example, okay, explain a little bit about Dr. Mastura, because I've tried this before. I've tried this before to see how accurate ChatGPT has captured information about myself. For example, this is just an example. So it turns out that ChatGPT only captures 40% of accuracy about me. 40%, 40%. Because in ChatGPT it says Dr. Mastura is an environmental lecturer from University Putra Malaysia, which I don't do environmental, right? So um, how to actually get it accurate is to always cross-check with the actual fact. Like say for example, you want to ask ChatGPT about the variation of apple, for instance, right? Because that is rather a generic information. It might be a little bit more accurate than asking specific information, for example, about myself, or a very specific information about your area of study. Let's say, for example, I have also asked ChatGPT. Basically, it's just a simulation that I've done in my class for my research methodology class. I did this simulation with my student, and I asked ChatGPT to actually explain to my students about citizen journalism, because that is basically what will be my main area of research, citizen journalism. So, in terms of the fact that is presented via ChatGPT at the time, the fact I can say would be 60% correct, but the citations is not correct at all. Because in the prompt, I've mentioned that please include reliable sources. Because I have studied citizen journalism for 4 years, so I know who will be the main scholars in this field. None of the suggested references in ChatGPT was an accurate one, even though the information is 50%, there's fact there, but the citation is done very poorly. Very, very poorly. When I cross-check in the internet, when I cross-check Google Scholar, when I cross-check Scopus, when I cross-check Web of Science, none of the scholars mentioned in the ChatGPT prompt as the answer is actually a real scholar. Not even the title of papers ChatGPT claimed it referred itself to. So that's what I said. You cannot rely 100% on ChatGPT unless it is a very, very generic information. Like say, for example, you want to ask for a recipe to cook roasted chicken, for instance. You know, that is basically very generic. But if you want to do scholarly work, you have to always cross-check your sources. Because at the very bottom part of the ChatGPT page, you know, you can actually see ChatGPT may include inaccurate information. Please check your source. Right? So it is important for you to actually cross-check the information provided by ChatGPT, whether it's accurate or not accurate. But let's just say you want to actually include ChatGPT as part of your scholarly source. Let's say, this is basically hypothetical. You have to actually cite them properly. If you are using APA, you can find ways to cite in APA style citation. Definitely you can. And I just find that out earlier this year. You need, if let's say the item itself is solely generated by ChatGPT and you want to actually use that 100%, you can. But you have to cite the original source is as ChatGPT. Because you have to maintain the academic integrity by mentioning the attribution or the actual people that actually come up with this particular fact or information, which in my opinion may not be the most suitable way to go when it comes to academic research. Is there any other question?
Yes. So they said when using ChatGPT, the humanizing function acts as rephrasing. How is this applicable when avoiding plagiarism? And the second one is, what is doctor's preference when taking notes, digital or physical notes?
Okay. For the ChatGPT again, this particular ChatGPT thing is somewhat of a concern for students as well. So in terms of actually using ChatGPT and because as you know, as the user of ChatGPT, there are also apps that claim they can humanize, right? Humanize ChatGPT responses. I've used it multiple times and I found it lousy. Very, 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 very lousy. Meaning that you can use that as the kind of like initial components of your ideation. But still, because I've always mentioned this to my students, as advanced as AI is, God has given you the most precious gift that He can give you, which is your own brain. So please, please prioritize using your own brain, right? Even if I have a question, I think I have basically a student asked me this question last week. Okay, the situation is there is a international students that mentioned, oh, doctor, my English is not good, so I use AI to do translation from my native mother tongue to English. How accurate is the translation? The first question. And the second one is whether I can use the translation provided in English generated by AI as part of my thesis. The answer is yes and no. Like I said, you can use the premier idea of the translation as part of your thesis. But you always have to paraphrase and acknowledge the actual source of that particular writing to incorporate it as part of your scholarly work, if that makes sense. Okay, in terms of note taking, I use both digital and the old school way. I use both because I do find that at times when I want to use digital note taking app, sometimes when I do dual coding or intercoding of my speeches, or I switch in between languages, it comes a little bit tricky. So what I do is I do both. I do digital and I also do a physical note, a handwriting note, just to cross-check. Okay, because right now I'm still doing a lot of SVGDs, a lot of interviews as part of my current position as the researcher for Institute for Social Sciences or IPSAS, right? So, and also a lot of other projects. So I always do both just to cross-check the details and to maintain accuracy of what has been noted in the process. Does that answer the question? All right. So without further ado, let's proceed to mastering citations. So as I've mentioned, this is exclusively based on APA citation, but I just basically go through one by one if we have enough time by 12 so that you have some idea of how to do citations properly. Okay. So importance of accurate citation, maintaining academic integrity. So why we need to cite? Because first, we have to maintain originality in both parties, whether it is basically coming from your idea and you took some lines from other people, you have to make sure that the originality of both parties remain intact. This is very important because you want to give credit to the authors where it is due, right? And then secondly is because credibility. Well-formatted citations, regardless of the citation style, will increase the credibility of your work, demonstrating that you are actually done or doing a thorough research. That's why I said, item number 2, after planning the research aspect or the research process will take the longest time for you to implement. But once you have mastered that, you can go through the subsequent phases with more ease, right? So for compliance, right? Adhering to citation guidelines, in this case, APA, is often a requirement for academic assignments, for thesis, for any academic prone activities. Okay, so the impact of accurate citation is to allow your readers to verify your work and your sources. You know, there should be no questioning of other people whether you are doing your own work or you are plagiarizing others. So that will be the most impactful situation as a researcher. Because I'm assuming that the attendees here today are students that becoming novice researchers, either doing their master's or PhD. So these are the importance why you have to actually do accurate citation, right? So these are the main components, regardless of the formatting or the styles that you need to actually adhere. This example is focusing on journal articles because that will be the main source of your citation journey. So the list of author, the list of article title, the publication details, as well as the journal title. You know, particularly on the publication details and the journal title, some formats would have additional requirements, right? Not only not only the issue and the volume, you have to also know whether the format requires the title of the publication to be italicized, to be bold, to be to be capital. So you have to adhere to those formatting requirements, right? But for APA in particular, for your journal title, you have to itis italicize your journal title, meaning that you have to kind of present the journal title as in italic format. Okay, so it depends on what would be the preferred citation style that you want to use, as well as required by your organization or the journal that you are submitting for publication. Okay. And then these are the other materials. Besides online journals, you also cite websites, ebooks, online reports, streaming media, right? Including streaming media, because nowadays, students actually cite from podcast, podcast, as well as, let's say, for example, YouTube videos. So these are the way that you, or the information that you need to include inside your citation formation. Okay, so these are the items. I think you are no stranger of these particular items. You can read it on your own. Okay. And then in-text citation techniques. This becomes interesting because this is where the students usually take shortcuts when they do in-text citation. Okay, so first you want to do the most common way is to put the citation bracket, yeah, the citation bracket in the end, at the end of the paragraph, the citation bracket. So let's say, for example, you can see here bracket Smith 2021, right? The narrative. So basically, you integrate the author's name into the sentence. Let's say, for example, you have integrate your ideation with the original content. Then only you have to mention about Smith 2001 found that, and then elaborate on what have Smith 2001 found. Right? For direct quotation, if you are actually doing nothing, just to include the actual content for the original source, you have to do what we call quoting, right? We do the direct quotes, including the page number as well as the paragraph number, right? And then last but not least, you will have multiple authors, whereby you have to list, usually, let's say, for example, Mohammed, for example, it is my name, Mohammed et al., meaning that my paper has multiple authorship. So you have to actually include all the names of authors. If, let's say, you are doing it in a in-text citation, if it's more than 3 authors, you don't have to mention all surname of the authors. You just have to mention the first person's name, the first person surname, and then put et al. Okay, so this is how you actually familiarize yourself with in-text citation techniques. Sometimes I found this a lot, including in my own student thesis, right? When I evaluate student drafts, they are confused a lot of the times as to which technique to use in what situation. Okay, so most of the time, they resorted in the first 2 techniques, which is parenthetical as well as the narrative. But sometimes they forgot that they can do direct quotation. But in terms of whether direct quotation is applicable in all your paragraph, the answer is not. If you are doing direct quotation all the way, it will increase your similarity index with the original content. So you have to be aware of where do you want to use direct quotation. Okay? And then leveraging citation management tools. So these are among the tools or the apps that you can use to manage your citation. Basically, for most people, I think, and even me myself included, I always use Mendeley. One of the reason because it's free. Okay. Google Scholar, there's some problem with Google Scholar. You know, when you want to actually cite the article, sometimes the citation information is somehow incomplete, right? So in terms of, it's not wrong to use the citation provided by Google Scholar, but you have to double check whether the formatting is correct and all the required information is included. Same like Mendeley, if you are using Mendeley and if, let's say, the items in the journal article that you are using is properly captured, it can be an automatic formatting, but there are circumstances where not all the details are captured in Mendeley properly, hence you still need to do double checking. That's what I said. Your brain is much more capable than you think. It's much more capable than any other softwares or AI and whatnot. You basically have to look at these items or at these platforms and software as the way to ease your way in managing your resources. But that doesn't mean it can replace your God-given talented brain. So if you are considering yourself as a upcoming scholar, you have to familiarize yourself with the fact that the Almighty God has given you the best tool that is more capable than you think it can do. I'm not saying you cannot use these items, but you have to actually use this item along with your God-given great brain, right? Okay. So these are the items that you can actually use to help you manage your citation management. So these are the usual way to actually build your references list. Basically, for all formats, either it's APA or non-APA, usually it will be alphabetized. Basically, it is based on the author's last name or first name, depending on what will be the citation style of choice. And then for the indent, for APA, it is hanging to the right indent, to the left and to the right. So basically, the indentation depends on the format that you are using or the style that you are using. Double spacing, this is unique to APA. Some styles did not require double spacing, but capitalization, this applies to many of the citation style across the board. So you have to actually know which one of the referencing style that you are currently using and be consistent with it. Even for APA style, if you are using APA style 7, for instance, you have to consistently apply APA 7th edition throughout your document. Because let's say, for example, I'm using APA. So the current version is APA 7th edition. So I have to make sure that my citation is consistent in text and ref list using the 7th edition style. Sometimes the differences between the previous edition and the current edition is very small, right? Sometimes, let's say, for example, for 7th edition, we do not have to indicate the access date already because it is basically embedded in the current the current connotation of the OI. But let's say, for example, right, if you are using other formats, they still need the access date of the document. So regardless of what you are using or what you are actually planning to use, you have to make sure consistency is the key. Right, again, consistency is the key, see? Right, so consistency is the key. You can use technology, so you have to you can use apps and tools to actually help you to manage your citation. And the third part is ask for help. Do you know that our library, the Sultan Abdul Samad Library, you can actually ask for help for you to manage your citations. Basically, they are conducting classes for various part of referencing and formatting in the library. And most of the time, these classes are free, except if they are inviting outside speakers. But if it is basically conducted by the librarian, it is for free. Please do check their website to find out. They have a lot of resources. Please, 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 please check and please register. There are a lot of workshops, a lot of free classes that you can register actually, conducted by our very highly trained librarians. Okay. And then practice makes perfect. That is very, very much true. You have to familiarize yourself. And I think this is a very, very important component for you to actually go through, because academic writing is not a sprint. Academic writing is a marathon race. So you have to familiarize, you have to be resilient, you have to be very much aware of what you are doing. Okay? So these are the different components that you need to actually include in your references setting. These examples are specifically in terms of the arrangement or the position. You can see that I've used different colors. I've used to describe certain elements, certain component. So as you can see, as I've mentioned, this is for APA style. But as far as the component goes, regardless of where it is arranged, most of the citation formation information is included is pretty much the same. Okay, so this is an example for journal article. This is the year of publication, the author name, and then the article title, the journal title, the one in blue. Sorry about the a little bit of a mishap in terms of the arrowing, but I think you actually get the point. And then you include the volume. The volume, if you are using APA, it should be italicized as well. Same with the title. And then if you are doing it online, you have to include the DOI number. So this DOI number is a very important feature, particularly if you are citing online materials, because it is easier for your citation to get cross-checked. So let's say, for example, this particular publication is inside a journal that is basically indexed in Scopus. So every single time a person cited this article, the database will basically look at the DOI number to match whether the particular person have actually cited the article. So basically the DOI number is not just a number. That is why if you are citing an online journal or any other online materials, it is advisable for you to get your DOI number. And for your information, DOI is not only exclusive for journals. There are a lot of newer documents nowadays, either reports, especially including streaming. They are actually DOIing the transcript of the streaming so that it gets properly cited. But it is basically a work in progress. But you can see a lot more publishers, a lot more people actually are using DOI or identifier, digital ornament or identifier, to actually help with the citation and cross-checking of documents. Yeah, okay. So this is an example of chapter in edited book. So you can see I have actually put a different color to signify different components and how actually you would actually do this in an APA style citation. So this, okay. And then this is another specific example. So this is how you do your journal article and its citations. And then I also include the style notes. So if you cannot locate the DOI number, you have to include the URL, the URL item for the particular number or for the particular item. And then if there's no issue number, you have to omit the URL, the item's URL, right? And then for articles that the numbers or e-locators write in word article followed in the page number and range, and then so basically you have to follow the example above. So I would like to actually, if let's say this would be beneficial for you, as I've mentioned before, if the secretary allowed, I will give you like a reference list of possible publications and how would you want to actually cite them properly. Because with time constraint, I don't think I can go through one by one in actual detail. But for article, because most of us using online articles, so I spend more time in this type of publication. Okay? All right. So in this particular session, I would like to also provide some more examples for quoting, paraphrasing, and other scenarios. Why quoting and paraphrasing is highlighted in bold here? Because that is the usual way we are doing our academic writing, particularly in our literature review, for example, or in our problem statement. Okay? So author variation, as I've mentioned before, author variation is the number of authors. It can be single author, two authors, three authors, or more than three authors. So basically, what will be the components that allows you to present your citation in what situation that it may be? But for a lot of this explanation, because I don't think we can finish this on time if I'm going to do everything in depth. So I will also give you the APA 7th latest guide that has all these. What are the possible scenarios? Because if I want to explain to you the possible scenarios, I have to actually use a whiteboard and actually, basically pointed down scenario 1, what you should do, scenario 2, what you should do, etc. Because of the time constraint, I don't think I can or I will be able to do that in detail. And then we will also provide the reference list entries. The reference list entries is the one at the very back of your thesis. Okay? So these are the document that actually I will give you some information about, basically if the secretariat allows me to do. So these are the so this is the index for the page numbers, so it is easier, right? This is just part of the display. If you have the document later, this is the directory for the different sections. Okay, right. About APA referencing, sorry about this. So it should be about APA referencing. So basically, there are two parts of APA referencing that you have to actually be aware of. And this particular consideration is not limited to APA style. It basically comes across in every referencing style. But as I said, the current examples that I'm showing you is for APA style. Okay. So if it's basically if you are talking about in-text formatting, you can use the word A and D, or you can use the symbol and symbol, somewhat of a 8-number kind of symbol to represent if the article is actually having two authors. Okay, right? So in most cases, unless you are doing direct quotation, you do not need to include the page number inside your in-text citation. Right? Other than direct quotation, it is not compulsory for you to actually include the page number inside the in-text quotation, in-text citation. In-text citation means whatever that you put inside your paragraph. Okay? So, these are the example of in-text in-text citation. It can be done either at the very beginning, where the bracket is actually in between the year of publication, or at the end of the paragraph, as you can see in the second example. Okay, and then this is basically how you want to do direct quotation, 40 words or less. If you want to actually indicate specific number of pages, you have to do it less than 40 words. The direct quotation must be less than 40 words. If it's more than 40 words, you have to summarize or paraphrase it. Okay? So, quoting more than 40 words, there is a way to actually quote more than 40 words, right? But, but you have to actually be aware of the possible implication that if you are doing more than a 40-word direct quotation, it may be, and most of the time, it will be somewhat redundant of what you have done in the previous paragraph or the next paragraph. So if you ask my opinion, I would encourage, if you want to do quotation, direct quotation, it shall be less than 40 words per quotation. But that doesn't mean you can repeat 100 times of direct quotation. Okay? All right. So, and then multiple sources for the same information. This is particularly important when you want to actually quote multiple authors that agrees, particularly if you want the idea to be to appear supported by a lot more people. Let's say, for example, the example here, there is an established consensus that current trend towards warming climate is directly linked to human activity. So when you want to emphasize the point, what scholars do most of the time is to include multiple references in the in-text in-text citation. Okay? Right, so this is multiple words. So these are particularly in the earlier parts of my examples. These are the examples that you always use. Either you are using journal articles, or you are using non-journal articles, let's say, for example, chapter in a book or parts of book. So from the beginning part of the mastering citation is basically I arrange it so that it appears from the sources that you always cite, which is journal articles, to the less used resources. So as you can see here, multiple works by the same name, Bull and Bull, right? This is basically how you appear it in the reference list, right? If you are multiple works by the same author published in the same year, the first citation you don't have to put the first citation you have to put A, which is the earlier citation, and the next citation from the same source you have to put B, and then the third one you have to put C, meaning that if you need to actually use this particular scholar in this particular context must be a very, very important scholar that in your field, that you cite him or her very frequently in the same prominent output of his or her research. Okay? And then different authors with the same surname. Okay, so basically same surname, you have to provide the the initial of the first name to avoid confusion. You need to, if they share the same surname. Here it says B Morrison, B Johnson and M Johnson. So they share the same surname but different first name. So include the letter of the first name even in the in-text citation. Right? So these are another examples for citing ebooks and citing secondary source. Right? For if you are citing a secondary source, not the original one, you have to put the latest secondary source that you are actually referring. You don't have to include, if let's say the original article cited 1,000 times, you only need to focus the citation that you are actually reading for your research. You don't have to include all the other authors that have cited the same work. Okay, that is for secondary source. Okay, so basically you just do something like this, right? So and then these are what it looks like in the references list. So you include, in this particular sense, you include both citation, the one that you actually cited for the primary source, for the secondary source, and the first source. Meaning that, let's say, for example, there are thousands of articles that actually cited the same source. You only cite for the original and the latest article that you are citing, not anywhere or anyone in between the citations. Okay? Right. These are the variations for the non-author or 1 or 2 authors, as well as 3 to 20 authors. So these are unique for no author, meaning that, for example, if you are referring to a financial report, so there's no personal author for this report. So your citation must include the name of the organization as well as the year of publication. Right? So it depends on the type of publication, whether you need to italicize or not to italicized. So if the need for, if you see the examples later, if I give you the list, right, you can see that there are, most of the publications need to be italic in terms of the title, but there are also types of publication that you do not need to use italic, but to use quotation marks to mark the item title. Okay. So these are some of the examples. So for 3 or to 20 authors, right? You can see here that they use at all, as I've mentioned before. So these are the examples. So organization as author, it would actually, if let's say the organization is the author and you don't have the DOI, you do not need to include the DOI, but just include the URL link. But if the document has a DOI, you have to include the DOI for cross-ref. All right, so these are for journal article. And then these are for journal article, advanced online publication. I basically just go through the different types of online publications. This is for advanced online publication. So for example, recently, which is September this year, my particular article has been published as online first. So you can see that, let's say, for example, you publish in a journal and they put your article in online first. Let's say, for example, my article is put online first for the journal named Journalism. So this is how you actually put the citation. Meaning that you have to you don't have to put the issue and volume number because the issue and volume number does not exist yet. But you have to put the DOI number. If the DOI also did not exist yet, you have to include the items URL. So these are also conditions whereby journal article published in a supplement format. Supplement format, which means that it is not part of the main data collection. So this is how you actually cite them. So you can see that I also put style notes here. You have to include whether it's supplementary A, supplementary number 3, depending on what is listed as part of the main data collection. Let's say, for example, if you are citing an article and you focus on the supplementary data only, you have to look at the actual original article, what will be the itemization of that supplementary element. If it's written as supplementary A, in your citation also should include the term supplementary A, supplementary 1, supplementary 3, for example. Okay, so these are how you cite magazine and newspaper article. This is particularly important in my field. So I always encourage my students to actually look at this. Okay, so as you can see, how they do the references list is a little bit different than journal article because they put the publication date here, January 6, for example. So the publication date is included when you want to cite newspaper and magazine article. And next is books, right? So this is particularly very much common other than journal articles. So these are how you actually cite books, all right? And then this is for publications that have multiple editions or edited work. As you can see here, the author is included here of the chapter, and then there will be who will be the book editors. Let's say, for example, in my particular list here, it is said here that J. Coffin and M. Wright, right? J. Coffin and M. Wright are the editors. So you put also the editor's name in that particular reference inside the citation list, not necessarily the in-text citation. Okay, all right. So I can see a raise of hand here. You would like to actually unmute yourself and ask question? Would you like to actually unmute yourself and ask your specific question, sir?
There are some question in the chat box also, Dr. Mastura.
Okay, later on, after this, maybe I will spend some time to actually, because I cannot actually open the chat box, otherwise I
Oh.
cannot see my slide.
Oh, okay.
So I need someone to actually read the questions, tapi nantilah kejap lagi. I can see 10 Tenevan Krishnan, what's your question? You want to unmute yourself? Because you raise your hand, but you are still muted. Or you want to ask your questions and write it on the chat inside the chat box. It's okay, since he's not responding. So I hope you will write your question inside the chat box and then we'll go from there. Okay? And then these are another examples if you are actually quoting from some of the other types of references that we don't frequently use, like religious and classic works. Okay? And then these are the more recent one, web page or on the website. So this is how you do it. So if let's say you want to include a paragraph of that particular specific website, you need to actually mention the date, the year of publication as well as the paragraph number. Meaning that, let's say, for example, you are quoting from paragraph 3, you have to include it as para 3. As per the examples. Okay? All right. So, and then the good thing about the style guide that I'm using, it also provides the style notes. So you still have options whether to include or not to include certain items based on the situation that you are in. But if you have, let's say, for example, if you have the DOI number, for instance, it is compulsory for you to include. Why? Because that basically is the cross-ref requirement in the publication process if you are citing or quoting from a specific publication. So this is also, the next one is web page on a news website. So if you are using a news website, these are the same that I've mentioned. You have to mention the publication date as well as the URL of the website. For 7th edition, there is no need for you to include the access date anymore. But in the 6th edition, you need to include when are you accessing the article. Publication date is different from the access article. The publication date might be 2021, but then you are accessing it today, for instance. So in the previous APA style, you have to include the information as to when are you accessing the particular information. Okay. And then basically these are also on other types of online entry. For example, Wikipedia. So these are how you actually put the citation item. Usually when I do this training, what I would do for the students to remember better is to use whiteboards. But unfortunately, due to time constraint and lack of physicality, right? I might not be able to actually directly, because I do find that my participants for this type of training would remember better if I try to help them visualize the positioning instead of just showing them where is the position. Okay? All right. So the next one is how you actually cite a lecture note. Let's say, for example, you are citing your lecturers or your supervisor's lecture notes. These are the way how to do it. Basically, if it's an online note, you have to include the URL. But if it's a physical note, then you have to actually mention the information as to when exactly you are assessing the note, right? If it's available online, it is easier to cross-ref. And next one is a blog post. Okay. So a blog post is a little bit of a unique situation. Some blog posts have author names, whereas some blog posts doesn't have author names. So if the author name is not available, provide the username or the name of the blog. All right. Right. So these are other components: government, organization report, press release. Okay, for press release, it is also common in my field, as mentioned by Miss Pavitra, that I'm from public relations originally. We also use press release as part of the citation or items that we cite. Right, particularly, for example, if we are looking at new policies from the government. So the government would come up with a press release, for example, or companies coming up with a new product, for example. So these press releases are also is able to be used, but it shall be cited accordingly, according to the style that you are actually looking at. Okay. So for press release, the publication, if the publication is the same of the author, so you have to actually exclude the name from the back part of the references list. You have to mention only at the beginning. Okay. So these are other other materials like brochure, code of ethics, act of parliament. Okay. For act of parliament, particularly if you are actually, let's say for example, taking from my experience, I actually cited the Youth Development Act to know what is the age range for youth in Malaysia. So I have to refer to Youth Development Act to find out what will be the age range. So this is basically how I cited it. But during my time, I'm using APA 5th edition, so I still have to include the access date. But since you are doing APA 7, you do not need to include the access date. So these are other forms of publication, cases, standards, United Nations, treaty or convention. A lot of my other than journalism related academics, I do also cite a lot of standards and United Nations treaty or convention, particularly when I do research on women, children, and persons with disabilities. So these are among the items that I always have to refer to. So it depends on what will be the materials are you referencing to, right? So these are a more modern take on citation, streaming video, podcast episode, and music. This one in my area, which is in the media and communication, students always use part of podcast, part of streaming video, or part of copyrighted music to be included into the assignment submission. So these are also the components that I make it compulsory for my student to actually do it, to actually provide the right way to both in text citation in their paragraphs or captions, as well as in the referencing list. Okay. Right, so these are all about data. This is particularly very common in sciences to actually quote data set and part of data. So let's say, for example, you are just referring to part of the data of the research instead of the whole research context. This is how you have to actually provide the citation as well as the references list. As you can see here, okay, it depends on what type of data set what will be the platform the data set is coming from. You know, it can be coming from a website, it can be coming from a YouTube channel, it can be coming from a journal article. So how you actually provide the citation in the reference list, it depends on the platform that the data set is available in. Okay, so as you can see here from the examples, the in-text citation is simple, okay, but the formatting in the reference list will be slightly different depending on the platform or where you find this data from. Okay. All right, I think that will be the end of my presentation. For now, I would like to actually address some of the questions. I will stop sharing and I will basically look at the chat box as per the questions. Let me see. Cannot open mic. Okay. What's the... Okay. There's a question here. For the direct quote, meaning that we can copy the exact sentence. Yes, you can copy the exact sentence. But I've mentioned in my deliberation just now, it is advisable for you to limit less than 40 words per quotation. And yes, it will increase your percentage of similarity, but you have to discount that in other parts of your thesis. Let's say, for example, you do direct quotation a lot in your literature review. Then you have to counter back with less quotations in other parts of your thesis. Because at the end of the day, you have to adhere the limitation of percentage that is permissible in your institution, either provided by SDS formally or provided by your faculty or provided by any other institution that you are doing a particular research, for instance. Because when I'm saying this, it's not limited to SGS requirement only. Let's say, for example, you are writing for a journal. That particular journal has their own, own rules as to how much similarity, how much is the percentage for similarity is considered acceptable for a particular publication. Right. The capitalization seems a bit confusing. It's not consistent with the example. Like I said, I have already tried my best to deliver. But as I said, if you need more, more examples and details, I can give you the actual list so that you can refer it yourself. Right. Thank you, Mazin. Thank you very much. All right. So can you elaborate more on authors, on citing the other author? Right. Let's say, for example, you are citing a very prominent scholar. I'm taking mine as an example, Axel Burns. Okay. I will basically take his original work and cite it the first time. And then let's say, for example, in terms of contextual understanding, there are other authors that actually expand, support and expand his notion. So I will be citing the first original work as well as the last one that I cited for the contextual understanding. Let's say, for example, the article has been cited 1,000 times. You do not need to include everyone in the 1,000 times. You just need to actually include the original source as well as the article that you are citing for contextual or data reasons. Sometimes you are citing multiple works coming from prominent scholars that are cited by other scholars, right? Other future scholars. Let's say, for example, the original one was published in 1999. And the latest one regarding or following your context would be 2019. So I just cite two of the original and the current one that I'm using. Okay. All right. So is it acceptable for someone to cite himself? Yes, you are allowed to cite yourself. But it is not advisable for you to cite yourself too many times. Okay, let's say, for example, I'm submitting a draft, to a journal publisher. Let's say, for example, my recent publication, my recent Q1 publication, right? It is stated in the review process that authors can only cite themselves maximum 3 times if the citation is more than 50 other works. So you have to actually be sure of the submission guidelines if you are writing for a journal article that you are not citing beyond what is expected. But let's say, for example, right, you would be the small number of people that have done research on that particular topic in your country. For example, talking about citizen journalism in application context, I might be a very rare few people that have been done it in Malaysian application context. So I might have cited myself in the latest journal article. But that doesn't mean I cited myself 10 times out of 50. I only cited myself once, and that is acceptable. right? So some journal articles have provided the guidelines. Let's say, for example, out of 50 citation or out of 50 references, you can only cite yourself 3 times. Depends lah, right? But not too much. I hope that answers your question. All right, so can we please have the recording? So for the recording, you have to ask the secretariat as to whether it is available for students or otherwise. Okay, so the well, I do not know if we have sufficient time for that. Please, Mazin, please take time to explore Mendeley yourself first. And also, as I've mentioned, the library, the Sultan Abdul Samad Library, conduct classes for Mendeley regularly. So please register yourself for that course, for that half-a-day course. Okay, Mazin, I hope that helps. Because if I'm going to do that, it will take more hours. Okay? All right. I think I have answered your question, Nurul Munira, by my explanation. Is that adequate? Have you listened for my explanation? Nurul Munira, are you still here? Okay. I hope you can actually understand my explanation just now. And if not, I would actually encourage you to go through the materials that I will give, particularly from the list that I have. Okay. All right. So what about policy? I have to put the page taken for the policy. Yes, for policy, as I've mentioned just now, from the examples that I've given, for the policy writing, for the in-text citation, you have to include specific page or para that you have taken from the policy inside the in-text citation, as well as in the references list. Okay. All right, so there's also notation that you need to confirm your attendance here and disregard if you have already filled out the form. Doctor, for the authors citing other authors, meaning that the other authors add in the interpretation based on the original paper. Yes. Yes. Because, let's say, for example, I am citing John Creswell for my methodology part, right? And there are some contextual understanding that I would like to add on from other researchers that have cited Creswell as well, that has been in line with my understanding of my research process. Yes, you have to cite both authors, meaning that you have to cite the original source as well as the contextual source that you are citing. If that is basically applicable, Mei-Ling. So basically, when you do research, right, you cannot expect that everyone understands your contextual understanding of the research process as well as the scenario given for you to implement the research. Let's say, for example, we take John Creswell. He's a very famous author for methodology, i.e. mixed method, quantitative, qualitative. He has various books. Whatever that he has written in his books are general guidelines. Or he will include examples that fit in his context of research. But then there will be other researchers that will actually cite his work and put their context of research that is in line with your current research context. Yes, you have to kind of like, cite both of them, the Creswell and the sources that you actually borrow the context from, if you actually understand what I said. Mei-Ling, does that help? So when you do research, you have to have an open mind of basically interpreting ideas from the original author slightly differently because you have a different context. For example, if you are doing quantitative research, this is just an example. When you actually wanted to select your sample, you have to actually be known that regardless of where you are, based on the aim of the research, which is be done quantitatively, the context is for the results to be generalized. So you have to bear in mind that this particular application of ideation that you have from the original author might not be exactly 100% what you have in mind. Because your context is different, your population and sample is different, how you want to apply the research is slightly different. If I write something somebody else's already wrote, but I didn't know they wrote it, will it be, is that still plagiarism? Yes. This is called unintentional plagiarism because it is unintentional. But that's why I said, if you don't know, you need to find out if your particular, because you cannot say, my idea is the most unique in the world. No, you must get your idea from your readings, from your environment, from somewhere. You cannot actually be confident that your particular idea is original 100% from you. You do get inspiration, you do get direction from the items that you read, from the people that you met, from the people you interview, from your people you kind of do FGD, from documents that you read online, offline, etc. So to avoid the unintentional plagiarism, you have to always cross-check. That's why you need to do your citations properly so that it is easier for you to perform the cross-checking. And I don't know if this applies in all field, but I assume it does. But in my field, particularly in journalism or in communication for that matter, you know, it is very common to find examiners who are very, 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 very particular with whether you are intentionally plagiarizing other people's work or otherwise. Meaning that they will spend extra time to actually see whether students or novice researchers have cited their sources properly or not. So it is your job to make sure that you are doing things as properly as possible, if that answers your question. But not to worry, as I said, in my faculty, for example, we allow 20% of similarity. It's not that you cannot graduate if you have 5% of plagiarism. So don't be scared of it, but just to be cautious of it. Does that answer your question, Emeka? Please, 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 please take time to practice your citation. And do not assume that your supervisors nor your examiners wouldn't know. Doctor, if we are using ChatGPT to paraphrase and improve our sentence, how can we reduce plagiarism? Well, as I've mentioned, you can ask the help of ChatGPT to help paraphrase, but you need to know, because you are I'm assuming that you are a frequent user of ChatGPT. You should already know, if you are frequently using it, there are certain sentence structures that, for example, if my students send me a work or an assignment entirely generated by ChatGPT, I can instantly know that it comes from the ChatGPT. Just because the sentence structure are not humanly humanly spoken or humanly manifested. This is quite difficult if you are non-native speaker or you are not familiar with English. Let's say, for example, this may sound a little bit tricky. I would actually suggest, right, if you are using ChatGPT for paraphrasing, you don't assume everything that is provided by ChatGPT is concise. If you are a good English speaker, for instance, you just rephrase it again so that it sounded more human instead of a robot. If you're not a native speaker or if you're not good in English or any other languages that is operating, using AI, you can ask the help of a proofreader. Because the thing is, it's very, 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 very easy for me, for example, just an example, to detect whether one actually have uses ChatGPT in their writing or not. Because the structure is not human-like. The active voice sometimes is not active voice. If you get what I mean. Meaning that if you ask, sometimes I understand, particularly if you have very limited time to proofread your journal article, for instance. Students tend to choose ChatGPT to help them paraphrase. There's nothing wrong about that. But then it is your job to make sure it fluids. The explanation is as fluid as you had read it. If you are an avid reader and if you have read many articles, you would know the items generated by AI in terms of the structure, in terms of the arrangements of words, in terms of, let's say, for example, the word dwells, DELVES. ChatGPT always like to use this word. But if you look at the dictionary, the connotation of the word dwells might not match to the connotation that ChatGPT generated, for example. Right? So you have to, yes, you can somehow generate paraphrasing using ChatGPT, but I can guarantee you it is detectable by any plagiarism tool or any plagiarism software, and it will mention it is AI generated, not human generated. It's because the sentence are not human at all. It's very generated. I actually want to encourage you all, when you do this paraphrasing using ChatGPT, right? You try to read it out loud, sentence by sentence. Definitely you will find odd spaces, odd sentences, and you will find, okay, this item doesn't necessarily make sense. You have to make it more human. Even though after you have used humanize, there are a lot of platforms and websites that claim they can humanize AI. I would not agree. Because even if they want to humanize it, it still sounded ridiculous most of the time. So like I said, no one can beat your God-given gifted brain, regardless of how much you are reliant on AI or any other tools. Okay, so any other questions? Last question before we end the session. And before we end, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to the session. And I hope this session has been beneficial for you and your future research journey.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sura, for being with us today. And I think the students particularly enjoyed the session because we keep on seeing questions coming up throughout the session. They didn't even wait for Q&A. Okay, so everyone, I can see that some of you have requested for the recordings and the slides. The recordings we will upload in our SGS YouTube channel. You guys can just go and revisit the whole video, the whole session there. As for the slides, if Dr. Masura permits us to share it with you, we will be emailing to you only for those who have actually registered your attendance and has done the evaluation, completed the evaluation form that we have provided in the chat box. So please
For
make
me
sure.
personally, I may not actually share my slides because I also use
Okay.
them for other purposes like other
Uh-huh.
organizers. But what I will do is I will provide the actual source, the APA7 source that I used to develop this particular slide. So
Okay.
it will be still very much beneficial for the students because I think what they want to see actually is the actual examples so that they can
Yes.
actually cross-check whether, that's basically useful or not for their particular citations.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. So, everyone, you heard Doctor. We won't be sharing you the slides, but only the actual sources for you to actually have the APA reference formats and everything. Okay. Again, we will only be able to do that if you have completed the evaluation form. Since it's all from the system, we can only see those who have registered and evaluated. So
So
once
please
again, thank you.
register, please register.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I think it's very helpful for all the students, especially those who are doing their writings and about to publish. I think this is very important because plagiarism is a no joke, especially for us in SGS. They might have poured everything into their writing, but without them realizing, there might be some sort of plagiarism. Unintentionally, keeping it very positive. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. So I
Thank
pass
you
it
so
to
much.
Mr. Arif to handle the photography session so that we can have a record that Doctor was here with us today and so that we can invite her for more sessions after this.
Okay, can we have everybody open their camera for just a short time? We need the photos. Okay, page 1, just mine. Page 2, just mine. And last one. Okay, thank you all. That should be it for our photo session.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you, Dr.
All the very
Mastura.
best.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Doctor. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day and happy New Year in advance to everyone. Happy holidays to you as well. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, everyone. For those who have not completed the evaluation form, we are keeping the Zoom meetings on for the next 5 minutes. Just click on the link and make sure that you do the evaluation. Thank you.